Appearance on Dion's Daily Dose does not imply endorsement from or by any candidate or guest. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed by Dion Bergeron or Dion's Daily Dose are his own and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of any guest. Material and information presented is for general information purposes only. The Dion's Daily Dose name in all forms and abbreviations are the property of its owners, and its use does not imply endorsement of or opposition to any specific organization, product, or service. If you'd like to support the show, please visit our Patreon at patreon.com/Dion's Daily Dose.
Hi, everybody. So, I wanted to let you guys know, it's been a few days, but I'm actually trying to figure out what I'm going to do because we're actually coming up on, this is number 298. We're coming up on the 300th episode that will be uploaded to like streaming platforms like Spotify, audio, podcast stuff. I'm way more than 300, but that's basically some of them in my early days. There's no point, like they were very campaign specific. So we're trying to figure out, but Friday is going to be our 300th episode because I'm going to put something out tomorrow. So we're going to do something a little different, a little interesting, something. We haven't decided what yet exactly, but in case you guys wonder, the whole like reason I'm looking off screen is because there's Shawn.
Hello.
So tonight I wanted to do something a little different since we're coming up on number 300. What do you know about the Weimar Republic?
The only thing that I really remember or hearing about is that inflation was out of control.
Yeah, it was. I remember that from school, right? I remember hearing about it. And okay, so let's start with what is the Weimar Republic? It is a term given to Germany after World War I, but before World War II. Before the rise of power of it's like NSDAP, the National Socialist Workers Party, whatever the actual designation, now known by the N-word, NAZI. Oh my God. But the initial, basically the place where they came from was a terrifying place. The Weimar Republic. So we're gonna dive in real soon here, but there's a lot of things that people just genuinely don't understand about the rise to power of the German chancellor, right? The failed Austrian painter is what they like to call him. One of the things that I think is really, really important to remember is what that country looked like when he came to power, or I should say, predating his rise to power. What kind of country was it? Like, what were the people doing? Why was inflation so rampant? I found an excellent thread by someone that I follow on Twitter who really laid it out and really talks about all of the wild stuff, because there was some crazy stuff happening in Germany. All of the wild stuff that was happening, and we're gonna dig into it. But I was just curious what you knew about it, because I remember they focused a lot, at least when I went to school and we learned history, particularly German history, pre-World War II. They focused a lot on the inflation. They said it was rampant and out of control. I guess it took like wheelbarrows full of money to buy like a loaf of bread. It was actually more cost effective to burn the money for heat than to buy like wood or coal or things, because that's how crazy it was, out of control. But let's dig in, and you'll get to see exactly how wild this is. Now, the guy's name Noble. I don't know him personally. But his @ is @Noble _X_X_. So in case you guys want to see it. All right. So we're often told Western societies are experiencing conditions reminiscent of the German Weimar Republic. I've heard that. I've heard that, it's looking a lot like Weimar around here. I was like, what does that mean? Right? But what exactly was the Weimar Republic? I'd like to explain the Republic and its incredible levels of debauchery, meaninglessness, sex, drugs, and the jailer. The decay of moral values in all areas of life, the period of deepest German degradation, coincided exactly with the height of German Jewish power in Germany. Okay, I don't know, but first, a disclaimer. The accompanying video, which is we're not gonna watch, but they talk about the video a lot. The accompanying video is from a progressive documentary. It's biased against National Socialist. That's what it was. It's biased against the National Socialists and views everything in a sex positive light. I think you'll see, though, what the film attempts to portray as healthy sexual relationships comes out appearing to be nothing more than debauchery. Okay, well, let's see. The Weimar Republic is the unofficial name that was popularized by the German painter. I don't even know if you can say his name anymore on YouTube without, some serious issues, but of the German nation state that existed from November of 1918 to March of 1933. It was named for the city of Weimar, Germany, where the Constitutional Assembly that established the new German Republic met. The actual official name of the republic was the German Reich. The Weimar Republic was established after Germany's loss in World War I. Germany was forced under the Treaty of Versailles to accept, quote, full responsibility for the war and pay the debts of all the Allied countries. Being forced to pay these massive debts devastated the German economy and skyrocketed inflation, unemployment, and suicide within Germany. At one point, 40% of Germans were unemployed and many were homeless. Can you imagine that? 40% unemployment? Wow. That means almost half of your neighbors would be unemployed. You got a basically, 1 in 2 almost chance of being unemployed yourself. That's insanely high. In 1932, the German suicide rate was more than 3 times that of Great Britain. And in 1 2-year period, Germany had more suicides than there had been deaths of American soldiers in all of World War I.
Wow.
Like, really let that sink in. That's crazy, man.
That's a lot of people.
That's a lot of people. The German currency became the most worthless currency in Europe. A loaf of bread in Berlin that cost around 160 German marks at the end of 1922, so 160 marks, cost, wow, that's a lot of zeros. So this would be 2,000 million billion. 200 billion German marks by late 1923. Wow. So it went from 160 to 200 billion for a loaf of bread. That is insane, man. That is insane. The German people's life savings and purchasing power had melted away over the course of a few months. With a single US dollar being worth, holy cow, 4,210,500,000,000 German marks by November of 1923. Foreign currencies had much greater buying power in Germany. That makes sense. So naturally, foreigners flocked to Germany to take advantage of the cheap prices. With these foreigners arriving in mass, Germans desperate for work turned to one of the primary industries the foreigners flocked to Germany for, the sex industry. Further reading, now if you want to learn about the inflation or the suicide rate, unemployment, this is one reason why I really like Noble, the individual whose thread this is. He always provides references for the stuff that he talks about. It's really, really handy Just saying. Sex and drugs. Amidst the dire economic conditions, Germans flocked to urban hubs in pursuit of job opportunities, and one of the most popular job sectors happened to be one of humanity's oldest industries, the sex industry. Prostitution in Berlin wasn't explicitly legal, but existed in a kind of legal gray area where certain aspects of the sex trade were regulated while others remained unregulated. Regardless, enforcement of any laws restricting prostitution was lax to non-existent. Check this out. On any given night, up to 100,000 prostitutes would line the streets of Berlin. Every type of prostitute was available. Midgets, pregnant prostitutes who lined up on the street according to how pregnant they were, prostitutes that purposefully tried to be ugly, prostitutes with acid-scarred faces, missing limbs, mother and daughter pairs, dominatrixes, even hunchback prostitutes. Interracial, intergenerational, forced, or abusive sex acts were all available for the right price. There was also a large, I'm gonna stop there for just a moment. You know what that reminds me of? I actually took a trip when I was a truck driver in my early days of being a truck driver trainer for Werner Enterprises. We had a delivery that had to go to by Laredo, basically, right? And the guy was begging me, the trainee that I was training, he begged me over and over and over to go to Mexico, right? They had these guided tours that they reach out to the truckers, right? And they carry you across the border, take you to a place called Boys Town. You ever heard of it?
No.
It is it's essentially a prostitution ring, right? It's a little walled compound in Nuevo Laredo. I mean, New Laredo, just the other side of the Mexican border, right? And it's a walled compound where there are these little rooms set up. And there's bars, right? And we got various warnings before we went in, right? Don't be dumb. Don't do anything stupid because the law is completely different here. And the fine is whatever you have in your pocket or whatever jewelry you have on you. Give them that, they'll let you go. I was like, what? Take that off.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, they had pretty much anything you can think of in these. And when I say rooms, I mean like half the size of this room, like almost the size of a cell. A little bit bigger than that, but not by much. Just enough room for a bed and a wash basin. That's it. And you could do whatever you wanted. I didn't partake. I was happily married, but my trainee, oh my God, dude, this guy was over the moon. Here's the point though, right? There were some there that definitely were not 18, if you know what I mean.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're in a foreign country. It's not like I can just go, you're coming with me. We're going to break you out of here. Much as I might want to do that, it's not going to get anything except me arrested. So, yeah, it was disturbing to say the least. There were transvestites in the bar. Oh, I guess you can't say that word anymore, but that's what they were. That, as a matter of fact, the trainee that I was with starts making out with what he thought was a female.
It was a guy.
And it was a dude. Yeah. And I had to break it to him. And he had already had a few drinks in him. You know, he didn't notice the Adam's apple. But yeah. Yeah. Anyway, it was an interesting time, to say the least. So there was also a large male prostitution industry, and homosexual men from across Europe came to Germany to pay for homosexual sex. And also, unlike most cities, Berlin boasted having not a single red light district, but multiple. Child prostitutes were bought and sold in Weimar, Berlin in a booming industry. Advertisements for child prostitutes were even placed in German magazines and newspapers.
Wow.
A person could order a child or other type of prostitute over the phone and have them a few short minutes later. How messed up is that, dude?
That is
British historian Sir Arthur Bryant describes throngs of child prostitutes outside the doors of the Great Berlin hotels and restaurants. Bryant adds most of them, the nightclubs and vice resorts, were owned and managed by Jews. I was wondering where that would come in because it said at the beginning, I'm like, And it was the Jews among the promoters of this trade who were remembered in after years. There were homosexual, lesbian, and even transsexual clubs where occasionally public masturbation and orgies took place. So I'm going to stop real quick here because there's this thing going around, right? That I saw it. Where did I cannot remember where I saw it, but it's on like a mainstream magazine. And they're trying to say that straight guys, right? It's perfectly okay for straight guys.
I saw that.
Did you see that? To like group masturbate or so, I'm like, no.
Yeah, I saw that.
No. That's not straight.
I don't remember where I saw that.
It was like New York Times or Wall Street, something like that. It
Might have been in the New Yorker.
Rags. Maybe it was New Yorker. It actually is probably what it was. But yeah, like it was just, oh yeah, that happens all the time. Nah, bruh. Nah. No, not this little white boy. Negative. These homosexual bars weren't isolated or rare one-off outliers either. There were over 50 lesbian bars in Berlin alone and around 100 homosexual bars total. Drag shows and cross-dressing were commonplace in these bars. In some of the lesbian clubs, lesbian women were even arrested for being too sexually perverse on stage from time to time. With all this stuff going on, I cannot imagine how perverted that had to be. For the other stuff. Sexual acts involving torture or acts bringing a victim close to death, or even in some instances to death, were performed in Weimar, Germany, called Lustmord. Lustmord? Not sure how you say it. As often happens when violent sexual perversions arise, so too do serial killers playing out their fetishes in reality. I refuse to name serial killers in my writings because I think it glorifies them, but you can look them up yourself. German newspapers devoted entire sections to the violent sexual crimes of these serial killers, and fictional accounts of murders sold very well on German book stands. Serial killers had a romanticized lore around them, similar to what we see in Western society today. That's true. You notice these serial killers end up with like groupies, and it's the weirdest thing, man.
Charles Manson.
Right? Like I would argue he had way more power after getting arrested. He's got like all these people that will do anything he says. It's mind blowing. Jeffrey Dahmer.
That's another one.
Yeah. Did you see
Yeah.
Alongside prostitution and homosexual clubs, porn also enjoyed a golden age during the Weimar Republic. Like prostitution, porn existed in a kind of legal gray area where any regulation around it was lax to non-existent. Images could be purchased under the counter at most street media kiosks. According to one report, there were as many as 30 homosexual publications on any given Berlin media kiosk. That's a lot, dude. Above all, go ahead.
And this was the 1930s?
1920s.
Yeah, 1920.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Above all, pornography featuring models who bore a resemblance to the biggest movie stars of the day, such as Marlene Dietrich or Greta Garbo, were in the highest demand. almost like the deep fakes now, the AI deep fakes, right?
True.
Interesting. Fashion began to blur the lines between masculine and feminine. The female image began to experiment with a more strong-willed, independent tone, and some women began to dress in masculine clothing. Similarly, male fashion began to experiment with feminization, and cross-dressing amongst men began to rise. That sounds familiar, doesn't it?
It does.
Berlin's women began to question the need for a man in their lives at all, and many Berlin women had no desire to start or raise a family. Drug use in the Weimar Republic also ran rampant, and Berlin gained a reputation as a drug-dealing hub around Germany and Europe. Cocaine was the most popular drug in the Weimar Republic and only required a simple prescription from a doctor.
Wow.
It's a different time.
Yeah.
Remember, Coca-Cola used to have cocaine in it. That's why it was called Coca-Cola. Very different time. It's a hell of a lot better than caffeine from what I hear. I don't know. I've never tried it. But that said, opium, a predecessor to heroin, morphine, and amphetamines were all readily available and extensively used as well. The drug usage was so pervasive, there was even experimentation with using drugs for scientific sexual purposes. One of the chief scientists behind this experimentation with sex was a man named Magnus Hirschfeld. You heard that name?
I have not.
Magnus Hirschfeld was a homosexual Jew and one of the thought leaders behind the sexual debauchery overtaking Berlin. Hirschfeld had founded political organizations that fought for the rights of homosexuals in Germany well before the Weimar era and as far back as 1896. He led the campaign to overturn a statute of German law called Paragraph 175, which forbid homosexuality in Germany. Hirschfeld would later go on to write a 1914 book called The Homosexuality of Men and Women, in which he attempted to prove homosexuality occurred in every society around the world. Interesting. Interesting. I don't know about that. And I'm of the opinion, I don't care what you do, as long as like you're not doing it to kids. And two consenting adults can do whatever they want. Hirschfeld's crowning achievement of debauchery, however, occurred in July of 1919 when he opened the Institute of Sexual Research. Oh, God. Okay, here we go. I'm going to try. Institute für Sexualwissenschaft. Sure, in Berlin. Institute of Sexual Research. That's what we're going to stick with because my German is non-existent. So the Institute's stated purpose was to establish the sexual sciences. And establish the sexual sciences the Institute did. It was at the Institute for Sexual Research where the initial rubric for the innumerable genders we see in leftism today originated. The Institute even performed sex reassignment surgery. At the Institute, Hirschfeld developed a system which categorized 64 possible types of sexual intermediary, aka genders. And it was Hirschfeld who coined the term transvestite in 1910 and the term transsexual in 1923. Interesting. The Institute of Sexual Research also housed a massive library for any and all homosexual, transsexual, and erotic literature. The Institute had places for homosexuals to stay overnight, as well as some of the first counseling services specifically tailored to homosexuals. Homosexual-specific medical services were provided in the Institute as well. The Institute also housed the Museum of Sex, an educational resource for the public, which was reported to have been visited by school classes. Where have we seen that? Yeah. Yeah, let's read that again. The institute also housed the Museum of Sex, an educational resource for the public, which was reported to have been visited by school classes.
That's insane.
You kind of like drag shows for kids.
Uh-huh.
I think the writer Luigi Barzini most succinctly summarized the rampant debauchery of Berlin when he said, quote, I saw pimps offering anything to anybody. Little girls, little boys, little girls, robust young men, libidinous women, animals. The story went the rounds that a male goose whose neck you cut at just the right ecstatic moment would give you the most delicious frisson of all, as it allowed you to enjoy words I probably can't say on YouTube. A lot of bad stuff.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. That's messed up, dude.
That's really messed up.
A debaucherous infestation had overtaken Berlin, and nowhere was that more evident than in the arts. And then in-depth look at Berlin's sexual perversity. Sexual perversity with cited sources, various links. Art, music, and film. Art, music, and film in Berlin were overtaken by the sexual revolution and a move toward a Jewish-influenced anti-authoritarianism. The Berlin film industry started releasing risque films and homosexual films. The world's first known homosexual film, Anders als die Anderen. Again, my German's non-existent. 1919. Wow, dude. Came out in Berlin during the Weimar era and is the story of a man falling in love with one of his male violin students. This film was written by and featured none other than Magnus Hirschfeld himself. Another film called Mädchen in Uniform, 1931, is about a schoolgirl who falls in love with her female teacher. The two commence a forbidden love and eventually even share an on-screen lesbian kiss on the mouth. The film ends when this lesbian love is exposed and the protagonist attempts suicide. German expressionist cinema also came to prominence in the Weimar Republic. This form of cinema emphasized depicting the artist's inner emotions, no matter how crude those emotions may be, rather than attempting to replicate reality. Two of the three key figures for the German expressionist movement were Fritz Lang and Robert Wiene, W-I-E-N-E. Wien. The expressionist film Metropolis was one of the biggest films of the Weimar era. Metropolis's content is emblematic of the anti-authoritarian and communist messages of German expressionist cinema. You know, what's interesting, real quick, is do you remember, I mean, obviously we're both too young to have experienced it, but there was a huge exposure of communism in the arts here in the U.S. You remember that?
No, I don't remember it
Not
going
remember
on,
it happening,
but I've heard it.
Yeah, hearing about it. Yeah. The film takes place in a futuristic city where a beautiful and cultured utopia exists above a bleak underworld populated by mistreated workers. When a privileged young man discovers the grim scene under the city, he becomes intent on helping the workers. He befriends a rebellious teacher, which puts him at odds with his authoritative father. The film was both directed and produced by Fritz Lang and Erich Palmer. The credits of the films of the Berlin movie industry were also littered with Jews. In fact, in 1931, over 60% of German films were produced by Jews, and 82% of film scripts were written by Jews. That's interesting. That's a huge percentage.
Mm-hmm.
In the art scene, a thoroughly anti-authoritarian and communist movement called Dada arose. I don't know if I'm saying that right. The Dadaist movement was comprised of artists who rejected the logic, reason, and aestheticism of modern capitalist society, instead expressing nonsense, irrationality, and anti-bourgeois protest in their works. The bourgeoisie, the thing they want us to fight. The Taoist, I don't know how you say it, works opposed any type of authority and made fun of far-right figures, including the painter himself. According to Wikipedia, some sources claim the Dadaist movement was founded by a group of Jewish modernist artists. That's Wikipedia, though. In music, one of the most popular singers of the day was a woman who was largely regarded as the first official lesbian of Berlin, named Claire Waldorf. Waldorf dressed masculine and made no secret of her sexuality while actively trying to convert other culturally important women to become lesbian. One culturally important woman Waldorf succeeded in converting to bisexuality was one of the biggest movie stars in the world, Marlene Dietrich. Marlene was famous for pushing social norms and sometimes wore a tuxedo, helping to erode the image of traditionally masculine and traditionally feminine roles. Marlene credits Claire Waldorf as, quote, introducing her to lesbian love. Marlene Dietrich was openly bisexual and an icon for homosexual women around the world when no other homosexual icons existed. I could see that. One newspaper dubbed Dietrich, quote, perhaps the busiest and most passionate bisexual in theatrical Berlin. Anita Berber was one of the most popular nude dancers of the Weimar Republic and danced to songs with titles like Suicide, Morphium, and Madhouse. Those just sound like horrible songs, I'm just going to say. One of her husbands was also openly homosexual. How does that work?
That's a good question.
In one famous story about Anita, she was being ignored by one of the tables she was dancing for. So she went over to the table, stood on top of it, and started peeing on the table while drinking their champagne. What a gal.
Alrighty then.
Oh my, that's okay. All right. There's some more further reading. Architecture. Now, this is really interesting. One aesthetic element I think tends to be overlooked in most writings on social decay is architecture. It should come as no surprise that the principal architecture movement of the Weimar Republic, called Expressionist architecture, also took a turn from an aesthetic focused on beauty and perfection toward an aesthetic that focused on, quote, distortion of form to create an emotional effect. This is art/architecture that's generally perceived as hideous or repulsive. I'd also argue there's a larger psychological component to this expressionist architecture art. This hideous art and architecture contributes to social decay by glorifying the more disgusting elements of society and humanity. It subconsciously undermines the idea that society should strive for perfection and instead is a call to accept society's more heinous elements. This repulsive architecture is, in my view, anti-authoritarian and destructive to social norms. I will say this, like, look at, for example, some of our most famous buildings that were built many, many years ago, the founding of our country even, right? The White House, beautiful building. The Capitol building, gorgeous. Lincoln Memorial. All these things are absolutely beautiful, right? New stuff is absolutely hideous. It is horrible. Like, at least in my opinion. I don't know what you think.
Yeah.
The whole steel and glass concrete thing just doesn't work for me. I wonder, like, when did that change? Here, and I'm talking about like here in America, because I'm not sure. All I know is we went like from gorgeous historical buildings to the trash that they call modern nowadays.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm not sure. Two of the key architects of the Expressionist movement were Bruno Taut and Erich Mendelsohn. I've included some examples of German Expressionist architecture below, as well as examples of an aesthetically similar type of architecture called Bauhaus that was created in Germany during the Weimar period. All right. Okay, so here's Expressionist. Oh, that's just the definition. Oh yeah, I don't like expressionist stuff. That's like it looks like it was finger painting by a kid type of stuff.
Okay, that.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
So here are some examples. This is all. I don't want your newsletter. Yeah, see, look at, whoa. What the? That's supposed to be a baby cradle.
Yeah.
Blocks for chess pieces. Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. One of the key factors in Hitler's I said his name in his rise to power was his opposition of the Jewish influence inside Berlin. That's a lot has been made of that. We're well aware of that. As such, this article would be incomplete without looking at the Jewish influence that existed inside Berlin, or possibly more importantly, the German public's perception of the Jewish influence inside Berlin. Here are some of the figures I think best illustrate the Jewish overrepresentation in the Weimar Republic. All these figures should be viewed in consideration of this fact. Jews made up less than 1%, 0.09% actually, of the German population in the years of the Weimar Republic. That's not much. 1% is less than 1%. In my opinion, these figures are staggering primarily because of the Jews' immense overrepresentation in major positions of power within German society. Politics. The 1919 New German Constitution author was Hugo Preuss, Jewish. 1/4 of the members of the 8-person Council of the People's Deputies that established, I was like, I don't know who those are, that established the Weimar Republic were also Jewish. Otto Landesberg and Hugo Haas. Remember him from earlier. The main competing faction against the official Weimar government was headed up by Kurt Eisner, also Jewish. The SPD, Social Democratic Party of Germany. We've heard that term before. Oh, it's not socialism, it's democratic socialism.
Mm-hmm.
Was the political party that ran the Weimar Republic. Oh, that's why it sounds so familiar. The SPD's main political theorist was Jewish, Eduard Bernstein. 2 of the political thinkers most respected by the SPD were Ferdinand Lassalle, Leopold Sonnemann. SPD's foremost theoretician of this century, Rudolf Hilferding. SPD key figure, industrialist, and political thinker Walther Rathenau was Jewish. Vice president of the Berlin police, Bernhard Weiss, Jewish. In the first Weimar administration, Vice Chancellor Eugen Schiffer was Jewish, as was Weimar Interior Minister Erich Koch. K-O-C-H. Is that Koch or Koch? Do you know?
I
always
don't.
say it Koch just in case.
I think it's Koch.
Koch Wesser. 15% of Reichstag, which is German parliament, was Jewish. 22% of the Social Democratic Party was Jewish. For 1% of the population, dude. A large number of the members of the political elite of the Weimar Republic were Jewish. Rosa Luxemburg, Paul Levy, Ernst Toller, Erich Mühsam, Gustav Landauer, Eugene Levine, and Karl Radek. That's interesting. Interesting. Doesn't mean anything in and of itself, but it is an interesting statistic. The press. The 2 major press companies involved in producing newspaper and magazines were Jewish owned. That's like it's almost like a representation here kind of a thing. Like there's a lot specific. I'm just going to say his name. Soros owns a hell of a lot of newspapers. And did they ever like approve his deal for the radio stations?
Not yet.
He's trying to buy up even more radio stations.
He
He
is.
owns a bunch already, but he's trying to buy up more. Moss and Olstein was the biggest liberal publisher of newspapers and magazines, while Cherie was the biggest conservative publisher of magazines and newspapers. Both publications were owned by Leopold Olstein during the Weimar era. Jewish. Two of the chief editors of some of the largest Weimar newspapers were Jewish, Theodor Wolff and George Bernhard. One of the biggest newspaper publishers was also Jewish, Rudolf Moss. Moss, I don't know. The Arts. Erich Palmer was a German-born film producer and executive. According to Wikipedia, Palmer was perhaps the most powerful person in the German and European film industries in the 1920s and early 1930s. In 1931, over 60% of German films were produced by Jews, and 82% of the film scripts were written by Jewish writers. As mentioned earlier, two of the three key figures for the largest film movement of the Weimar era, the German Expressionist movement, were Jewish Fritz Lang and Robert Wien. The key architects of the Expressionist architecture movement were Bruno Taut and Erich Mendelsohn. Some of the main producers, directors, and actors, etc., etc. According to Wikipedia, some even claim the Dadaist movement was founded by a group of Jewish modernist artists. Possible. Sex. Magnus Hirschfeld was Jewish. He was dubbed the Einstein of sex. He was president of the World League of Sexual Reform and, of course, founder of the Institute for Sexual Research. That's that guy. Ivan Bloch was Jewish and is often called the first sexologist. As quoted by Sir Arthur Bryant earlier, quote, most of the nightclubs and vice resorts were owned and managed by Jews. And it was the Jews among the promoters of this trade who were remembered in after years. Other notable Jewish overrepresentations. Please note, these next 5 bullet points are not official numbers and are from a propaganda piece that was distributed in Weimar, Germany. I'm including them because although I can't be completely sure of their accuracy, I think they most likely do generally represent the amalgamations of Jewish power in Weimar society. And at the very least, these numbers represent the German public's perception of Jewish amalgamations of power in Weimar society. That I could see. 56% of notaries, 52% of doctors, 45% of hospital directors, 48% of lawyers, 35% of dentists
For Jews.
for 1% of the population. That's a lot.
That is a lot.
That's like a staggering amount if you think about it. The arts is one thing, right? I mean, generally your more left-leaning people tend to get into the arts anyway. But such a huge representation from such a tiny population number. The Weimar Republic was often referred to as the Juden Republic, Jews' Republic, by Germans. I think it's easy to see why. One last note on the Jews of the Weimar Republic. I included a link with more detail below, but many Weimar Jews actively tried to conceal their Jewish identity and even went so far as bragging to other Jews when Gentiles were unable to identify them. This is one of the reasons that, to this day, it's somewhat difficult to identify who the Jews of the Weimar Republic were. What this means is that although the identity of every Jew I list above is verified, there are undoubtedly other prominent or non-prominent Jews I was unable to identify. The list provided above should not be viewed as wholly representative of the Jewish influence within Weimar Germany. But even just considering the list above, you can see the influence was substantial for a race of people comprising less than 1% of the total German population. And that's the point that I've made. For such a tiny percentage of the population, they wield a great deal of power in Weimar Germany. This Jewish overrepresentation is even more substantial when you consider that many of these Jewish amalgamations of overrepresentation occurred within many of Germany's most important social institutions. Here's further reading and sources if you guys care. Enter the National Socialists. After his rise to power in 1933, Goebbels and the Brown Shirts began shutting down the homosexual and lesbian dive bars that had risen to prominence during the Weimar Republic. They made one of the most popular homosexual bars in Berlin their headquarters after shutting it down.
Wow.
Right? I did not know that.
Uh-uh.
They pillaged Magnus Hirschfeld's Institute for Sexual Research, and Hirschfeld's books on transsexual ideology were some of the first books the National Socialists burned. From Wikipedia itself, the books the National Socialists burned were writings on sexuality and sexual education, which served the egocentric pleasure of the individual and thus destroy the principles of race and Volk, Magnus Hirschfeld. Pornography and explicit literature. Pacifist literature. Interesting. Popular entertainment literature that depicts life and life's goals in a superficial, unrealistic, and sickly sweet manner, based on a bourgeoisie or upper class view of life. The works of traitors, immigrants, and authors from foreign countries who believe they can attack and denigrate the new Germany. H.G. Wells, Romain Rolfe. The literature of Marxism, communism, and Bolshevism. Literature with liberal democratic tendencies and attitudes, and writings supporting the Weimar Republic. Walter Rathenau, Heinrich Mann, Thomas Mann. Books that advocate art which is decadent, bloodless, or purely constructivist. Examples include George Grosz, Otto Dix, Bauhaus, Felix Mendelssohn. The decadent, destructive, and Volk-damaging writings of Asphalt and Civilization, literati. Oscar Maria Graf, Heinrich Mann, Stefan Zweig, Jacob Wasserman, Franz Beal. I don't know. Literature by Jewish authors, regardless of the field. Patriotic kitsch in literature. All books degrading German purity. All historical writings whose purpose is to denigrate the origin, the spirit, and the culture of the German Volk, or to dissolve the racial and structural order of the Volk, or that denies the force and importance of leading historical figures in favor of egalitarianism and the masses, and which seeks to drag them through the mud. Ergo, Emil Ludwig. Very quickly after Mustache Man's rise to power in 1933, the chief purveyors of the degeneracy that had overtaken Berlin would leave the city, and National Socialist Germany would rise from its ashes. The rest, as they say, is history. This is the film that they talked about. We're not gonna. Yeah, it's this here says an awful lot of people don't know any of this history. I had no idea about any of this. Only that the that's what it is, NSDAP, National Socialist something, arrived out of the blue, and that the Austrian painter was a very, very bad man. In history, context is everything. Nice work, brother. Bookmark, certainly be spreading. And again, this is just one example of the tons and tons of stuff that Noble has posted that are like fascinating threads. And he does such a good, she, I don't even know which, but they do such a phenomenal job with providing like sauce, with the links that you can go and read the stuff yourself and see that what he's talking about. There's not, like, I'm going to say this, man, is we are looking at some really concerning parallels. Like really concerning parallels. So this begs the question then, are we looking at some spam comment? Are we looking at a potential rise of a figure like the Austrian painter?
Good question.
Like, are we ripe for that kind of uprising?
I don't know.
I don't either. I'm just asking, like, it's when I like a lot of stuff is obvious, right? The rampant pornography addiction that today's generation has. I mean, interestingly enough, I don't know if you're aware of this, but the vast majority of porn sites are actually owned by those of Jewish descent.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Pornhub is actually owned by a rabbi.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. He's part owner. But
I didn't know that.
yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot. But the short version is we are seeing the same kind of overrepresentation. That's what bothers me. And here's the point that I think a lot of people get stuck on. I don't care where they're from. I don't care what their religion is. I don't care what their beliefs are. The fact is we have an overrepresentation of a tiny aspect of the population. And that bothers me no matter what. Because the way that our society is set up, the way this country is set up, is a representative republic, right? A constitutional republic. We are supposed to have these people who represent our interests, right? Should there be some women there? Absolutely. Should there be some minorities in there? Absolutely. Because those are aspects of the population of the United States. But when you have, like, for example, let's take what's her name? The one from Somalia who allegedly married her brother.
Omar.
We can't have a Congress full of Omars. Like, but even if, right, she wasn't as freaking nuts as she is and as anti-America as she is, by having a Congress full of Somalians, that would not be representative.
No.
Right? The same issue that I have when a relatively minuscule population has outsized influence on our elected officials. Are you familiar with AI PAC?
Yep.
That did you know that it was actually a guy from Gary who had introduced into the congressional record about AI PAC and how they were basically funding his opponents because he wouldn't sign their pledge?
Oh.
Yeah. I wish I could remember his name. Savage, I think. Like Gus Savage, I think is his name. It took me some looking. You guys feel free. I'm going to see if I can bring it up real quick. I got it saved, but he had a speech that he said on the floor of the U.S. Congress and talked about how AI PAC doesn't register as a foreign entity, that they have outsized influence on politicians. Let's see if I can find it real quick. Let's see here. Okay, so this is from 1990. Now, of course, I'm going to show you. All he didn't talk about their race, really, their religion, how he hated them, none of that stuff. But because he brought up AI PAC and because he said they're having an outsized influence, I'll show you guys. Gus Savage, D. Illinois, accused of making anti-Semitic remarks. Every time, regardless of if it's, necessary criticism or what's the word I'm looking for? Valid criticism or not, for reelect called a pro-Israel lobby group Wednesday, quote, illegally affiliated and un-American. In a speech to the House, Savage boasted of his March 20th primary victory in his overwhelmingly Democratic Southside Chicago district. Sorry, Chicago, not Southside Chicago, not Gary. 10-year veteran congressman recently criticized but not punished by the House Ethics Committee for alleged misconduct with a female Peace Corps worker in Africa. Savage said he won renomination despite efforts to beat him by the news media and the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, an American pro-Israel lobby, also known as AIPAC.
Yep.
Did you hear what Massey said? He went on Tucker Carlson. Did you see his?
I did not.
You didn't see his interview? He said he's the only one out of his congressional buddies who doesn't take money from AIPAC. It was shortly after that his wife died. I'm certain the two are unrelated. But I did find it interesting that I sent you the message that someone had replied to Massey with. The Twitter.
That was.
It was in very poor taste if it was not meant as a threat. If it was simply, it was basically a guy talking about how I hope you'll change your mind about, the things that you've said, and basically choose to take money from AIPAC moving forward. I mean, kind of, but that you've been very critical of Jewish people, and moving forward, I hope that you basically change your tune. This was like right after his wife, which we never found out how she died. They still haven't told us, have they?
They have not, that I know of.
Anyway, look up Gus Savage from Illinois, Democrat. And it says here, Mr. Speaker, I have just won re-election in a primary last week against the network of television and daily newspaper reporters and the Israel American Public Affairs Committee, an illegally affiliated political action committee, and as a consequence have been denounced by those, some in this body, who would be intimidated by this group that pledged loyalty to a foreign government above its loyalty to America, Savage said. And that, therein lies the problem. If the top nation in your mind that you're swearing allegiance to isn't the United States of America, you shouldn't be in Congress. You should not represent me because my allegiance is to the USA.
Mm-hmm.
That's the point. It's playing out, right? We've got, like, it seems like Weimar Germany was almost like Vegas on steroids, like to that level of I guess disgusting stuff. It makes Boys Town look like a Catholic school, man. I mean, and that's saying something, because yikes.
Mm-hmm.
This was the well before the days of pocket cell phones. Had I had a cell phone at the time, I would have definitely taken some pictures and video, because like you genuinely can't believe it. I wonder if I could find some online. Probably find some pictures, but I don't even know if the place exists anymore. It was many years ago. I don't know, but that's the kind of thing that concerns me about the movement in today's society. It is, I don't care what you do in your bedroom at all. Like, couldn't care less if I wanted to. I don't, whatever. But when they involve kids,
Mm-hmm.
and when they want to bring that stuff to the schools and start teaching them this stuff when they're like little kids, man. Little kids.
That's terrible.
Exactly. I don't care what you do, as long as you're not trying to, I guess, degenerate our next generation. And that's what really it comes down to. I think that is the goal. I think that's what they're going for, is the corruption of the youth. because then you have that next generation ready to welcome your policies in. To, you know, look at how people are wound up and up in arms about Roe v. Wade, right? Whether you're for or against abortion, people like, and I mean like dudes, I'm talking about dudes, they get like crazy on this stuff as far as like, yeah, what right do you have a woman to tell a woman what she can do with her body? Well, apparently all you got to do is say you're a woman now, so apparently I have as much right as they do. But in a real world, right, it takes two to make a baby.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're going to be able to cut that father out of the life of a child by having an abortion, then the father should have some say-so in that. I mean, the father is the father of the child. But here's the thing: abortion is a complicated issue. I don't pretend that it's an easy to solve conundrum. I don't pretend that I understand all aspects of it. But when I was 17, my girlfriend at the time went and got an abortion. She got pregnant. And she didn't tell me about it until after it was over with. So I can empathize with fathers who've experienced that. And I will say that I never wish that on anybody else. It's absolutely horrific. Absolutely horrific. If you can demand child support, did you see about the case where the woman had tricked the guy, or like collected his DNA, his sperm or something, and had the child without the man's consent, and then he had to pay child support?
Wow. No, I haven't.
Yeah. Look it up. It's like it's wild how far this stuff has gone. But slightly off topic, just a little. But bringing it back, it looks like so many parallels between Weimar Germany and today. We've got rampant inflation. Now, granted, it doesn't take billions of dollars to buy a loaf of bread. Not yet.
Not yet.
But we can see inflation is steady cranking up. And we can see the debauchery around us. And more importantly, like, dude, pride parades are out of control.
Mm-hmm.
They are absolutely out of control. I can't believe that no one enforces like public decency laws during these parades. I don't care if you have a parade. I'm all for parades, dude. Let's have a parade. But when you're going to do like blatant sex acts in public and then invite children to come see, nah. Like,
yeah, I saw that on the news.
Did you?
Yeah.
It's just,
In
it's
New York
sickening,
City?
dude. Probably.
I think it was New York. But yeah, sickening.
It is. It is. But I did find it interesting, the sheer number of parallels and what we're looking at moving forward. Maybe the left isn't completely wrong when they compare Donald Trump to failed Austrian painter, insofar as his popularity and his desire to not subject our kids to that kind of stuff. Let me ask you a question, and then we'll kind of finish. So we found out that the NSDAP burned the kind of materials that they did, right? Mostly what I call subversive or at least sexually deviant for the time materials. What do you think about that? Do you think burning any books is bad and like no censorship at all? People should be able to say whatever they want? Or do you think that, like, did they go too far? Did they go not far enough? What do you think?
That's a hard question.
It is. It absolutely is, because I'm generally in favor of 100% free speech. Say whatever you want, but look at what they're doing with our kids, man.
That's the problem. Yeah.
Look at what they're doing with our kids. So where before I would have said, oh no, absolutely not. You shouldn't, you shouldn't do this. You shouldn't do that. You shouldn't, you should allow people to say whatever they want or print whatever they want. But I don't know, man. I don't know. I will say this. I was always just told that they burn books. It was never told to me what kind of books. It's interesting they left that out, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
It's just something to think about, right? Something to think about. All right. So tomorrow I'm going to have a video for you. I don't know which one yet, but we'll have a video for you tomorrow. And then Friday, 7 p.m. will be episode number 300 that's getting uploaded to it's a 300 something. Okay. It's number 300 of a thing. It's not my 300 video, but it's my 300 video being uploaded to the various streaming platforms like Spotify and all these other ones. There's a lot of them too. Like we got a bunch. Anyway, so we're going to try to do something interesting and fun. And if you guys have any ideas or something you'd like to see for the 300th episode of Triple D, let me know. Talk at dionbergeron.com, or you can visit dionsdailydose.com and it'll take you right there. Just click the contact me or us or whatever it is. I don't know. Somebody else did the website for me. I used to, what's really funny is I used to be really good at building websites, right? You guys remember when Java was a thing? Like you used to program in Java. I did like several websites and they were really, really good. The technology just passed me by, man. I haven't kept up on it. And it's like, I don't know, man. Hey, what's up, Rick? How you doing, man? So, yeah, I don't know what the solution is there, but we'll figure it out. So, again, Friday night, we'll see you then. Without further ado, God bless you, God bless Indiana, and God bless the United States of America. Anything else you want to say, man? I think that really sums it up. We have we're on a downward trajectory in today's society, for sure. Like that much we see. I don't know what the answer is, but I don't think I don't know, man. If nothing else, the man had a very recognizable mustache. Very recognizable. Did you see? No, I'm not going to get started. Have a good night, ladies and gentlemen. We will see you tomorrow. We're already well into it. So I do hope you have a wonderful evening, though. And I apologize for the lack of videos the last few days. I've had some stuff going on. I just haven't really felt like doing it, and as such, the quality just wouldn't have been there. So I'm not going to subject you guys to anything worse than you already have to see. I'm just kidding. It's a joke. I'll see you guys later. Have a great night.
If you'd like to support the show, please visit our Patreon at patreon.com/Dion's Daily Dose. This has been Dion's Daily Dose, hosted by Dion Bergeron. Executive producers, Shawn Holmgren and Michael Beebe. Copyright 2024. Dion's Daily Dose, all rights reserved.